Campaigning is closed for the main candidates ahead of Sunday's presidential and elections in Mexico. Elections which for the first time will see undoubtedly a woman come to power. It's the protege of the outgoing Andrés Manuel López Obrador, Claudia Sheinbaum, who is ahead in the polls. She staged her final rally on Wednesday. It's been a bloody campaign. The number of candidates murdered rising to 23, with a mayoral candidate in the southern Guerrero state killed Wednesday. More with our correspondent Jan Grillo.
So here we are in the Zócalo, which is the symbolic heart of Mexico's nation and its democracy. And it's where Claudia Sheinbaum, a 61-year-old environmental engineer for the left-wing Morena party, is closing her campaign with the hope of becoming the first female president in all of North America. She's finishing on a high with a 20-point lead in the polls over her rival Xochitl Gálvez, but it has also been a political campaign season marked by violence, with 35 candidates running for different posts murdered and drug cartels as the chief suspects. This highlights one of the huge challenges she will face if she becomes president. But this close of campaign is a really festive atmosphere, so let's see how her supporters are feeling.
I'm happy and I'm here because I believe in this project. I used to be very skeptical with politics and I wouldn't vote, but she convinced me.
She's one of us. I mean, she knows our people. She's humble and she's not authoritarian like the people that led this country before.
Now, Claudia Sheinbaum has gained momentum with the popularity of the current president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, or AMLO, who's her mentor. We heard her promise to carry on his policies, and as she says, take them to the second level. Critics say she could be a puppet of AMLO, but she says firmly she will rule independently if on Sunday she's elected, as her supporters are saying, as the first presidenta of Mexico.
Jan Grillo in Mexico City. A lot to unpack there. Let's go to London and William Booth, lecturer in Latin American history at University College London. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
Good afternoon.
Let's just remind our viewers, if AMLO is not running again, it's because he cannot. It's a single term, 6 years in Mexico. Let's pick up on that last point. Will she be AMLO's puppet, Claudia Sheinbaum?
No, I don't think so. Of course, there's a huge institutional weight behind her, this new party and new coalition that was put together by AMLO in 2018. But it's proved popular, and it's also quite a diverse coalition. It's not, I think, Johan described it as being left-wing. I think it's a bit more complex than that myself, without throwing any shade on my good colleague. It's a party that is very smart about what it promises and what it delivers. And really, I think as long as Claudia Sheinbaum keeps providing these incremental gains to those who are worst off in Mexico, which has been the main achievement really of AMLO, to increase minimum wage and to bring in a meaningful pension for the first time in Mexico, then I think she will be able to start exploring her own path. And one part of that, I'm sure, is going to be more attention on environmental policy and on green energy. It remains to be seen where else she might break free from the consensus that AMLO's put together. But to be sure, his policies have been relatively popular, despite the massive vitriol that he also evinces from his opponents.
Yeah, people are talking about the tension on the campaign trail. Is this more tense than in the past?
Mexico's electoral cycle has had violence for a very long time. So I think you mentioned 23. I think I've actually heard 27 candidates.
Yeah, we heard Jan say 35. So it's actually the numbers are...
Okay, so it's, the fact that we don't know for sure maybe actually is quite indicative. That's not new, though. This is something that has happened. It's not partisan particularly. It does speak to the fact that the method of this violence now has seen more indiscriminate mass attacks, which has not been necessarily a feature before. It was much more about targeted assassination in the past. And that just speaks to the fact that there are many drug cartels who are acting with what they see as impunity, and that again that's not new news for Mexico. This is something that has been a reality in Mexico certainly since the Calderon government, when around 2008-9 they really declared war, in their words, on the cartels, and it had disastrous knock-on effects.
Now, Claudia Sheinbaum, what she does depends on how big a mandate she gets. It's not just the president who's being elected on Sunday. It's also Congress and their local elections. Some suggest there could be constitutional reform if she gets a big enough majority.
It's possible. I mean, I think with Mexico being so polarized, I'd still be a little bit surprised if there was a supermajority, but it's possible. It's the biggest exercise in democracy in Mexican history, and that's something that we should really celebrate, I think. This is the year of global democracy, we're told, with India and various other places going to the polls. Mexico is a big country with a huge population, these elections are being held in a new way. Overseas voters are being able to take part electronically. And also there's more of a constitutional mandate that there has to be gender parity for the first time. This was brought in 2019, so after the last presidential election. So it is really a redrawing of Mexico's political reality in a lot of ways. And there's been a lot of doom-mongering about how this is going to be a kind of handover from one authoritarian ruler to another. I don't think that's the case. You could see from the clip beforehand that these are ordinary Mexicans who are excited about democracy. It's not perfect. There are a lot of problems that this new government is going to have to confront. Drug cartels and violence, of course, being the one that's on everyone's mind, but a transition away from hydrocarbons, always a tense relationship with the US in one way or another. But there's lots of things to be really hopeful about too. This is a country that is going to the polls enthusiastically, I would say.
For nearly all of the 20th century, it was one party that dominated Mexican politics, the PRI. Anytime the party stands a chance of winning a second term, even though it won't be AMLO, but it'll be his Morena party, does that mean there's a new sort of political dynasty in terms of parties?
I mean, not necessarily. The PAN won in 2000 with that first transition, and then they won the next one in 2006, and then the PRI won it in 2012, and then Morena won it in 2018. So I don't think we've got any sorts of worries about that. And when you look at where Morena came from, it's made up of a whole different set of people from different political histories. AMLO was in the PRI before he was in the PRD, before he was in Morena. So it's not that this is a kind of simple lineage that brings us to a new political dynasty. And I don't think Claudia Sheinbaum is going to be nearly as much of a orthodox puppet or protege that lots of people are making her out to be. She's an extremely smart person. She's a smart political operator. She has different emphases from AMLO, and that will necessitate making different agreements in Parliament.
And what will become of AMLO?
Well, he says he's going to go and live quietly in a modest house in the countryside, and that's possible. I mean,
you're chuckling there. You don't believe him?
Well, no, I think it would be quite fitting. I can see him doing that. At the same time, he's obviously been so plugged into Mexican politics. He's made himself the embodiment of Mexican politics for the last 6 years. Like, he's really leaned into the kind of personalization of the movement in lots of ways, and it will be a wrench for him, I'm sure. You just have to look at his morning briefings, which run for 2 or 3 hours, where he engages with and sometimes castigates the press. It will be a huge change for him, and so seeing whether he can stay out of the limelight is, of course, something that everyone's very interested in. But I think that it's a transformation, and it would really undermine things were he to interfere. So I think there's a strong chance that he does go off and enjoy his retirement quietly.
William Booth, many thanks for speaking with us from London.
Thank you.